Hey, everybody, this is the SCB Steelers Inside Blitz, our little mini podcast, if you will, that'll come to you a few times each week. The actual SCB Steelers podcast, presented by Deck Roofing, will come up this Thursday night at 10 p.m. live on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can catch that anytime, either on YouTube or any number of platforms that you choose to listen to the show on. Two things I just want to talk about real briefly tonight is first and foremost, Gerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette put an article out there about the Steelers' problems offensively, especially over the last 5 games. And perhaps not so surprising is the fact that Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, apparently had some disagreements, let's say, over the philosophy of the offense. And you kind of have to go back to the first Bengals game in Cincinnati when Wilson had, I think it ended up being like the second best day of his long and potentially Hall of Fame career in terms of throwing the ball. And the Steelers put up 44 points that day. The next 5 games, they of course would lose, and they would not put up more than 17 points in any of those losses. And to me, the one telling thing in that streak, and first and foremost, you have to definitely, kind of tip your cap a little bit to the fact that they were playing the Chiefs, the Ravens twice, the Eagles. Okay, so 2 of those teams are in the Super Bowl. And then they had to play the Bengals again. It was at home, but it was also a fairly meaningless game because the Ravens had clinched the division. The Steelers were either playing to go to Houston or to Baltimore, and there's no doubt we would have preferred them going to Houston, but I don't honestly think it would have mattered based on the way the offense and the defense were playing, but that's history. The point of the matter is that was a game in which Cincinnati was playing for its playoff lives. They needed a win. They needed some help from other teams. And ultimately, they ended up beating the Steelers. But what many of us were left wondering was, what in the hell happened to the offense? Because we knew what it took to beat Cincinnati the first time. And Cincinnati's defense had been pretty poor most of the season. Okay, they had made some plays now and then. Trey Hendrickson had a great year, leading the league in sacks, and so we knew he'd be a problem. But the fact of the matter is, throw the damn football. And instead, we completely abandoned the pass and went to the run, and you could just kind of tell that it wasn't going well. The offense never clicked that day. And so Gerry Dulac's article points out that Smith wanted to heavily run the football and get away from allowing Russell Wilson to audible and make some changes at the line of scrimmage, which he did quite effectively in that first Cincinnati game. Well, I really want to think otherwise, but I can't. And what I mean is, I think this has Mike Tomlin's handprints on it as well, because as we all know, Mike Tomlin likes to play short games. He wants to hurry the game along. He wants to keep his defense rested. He wants to run the football, time off the clock, and just get out of there winning, as we call it here at SCB. We call it winning rock fights. And I really think that shift occurred. I think maybe in some ways that Bengals game almost kind of freaked him out a little bit, that they could actually score points. But if you recall, we actually gave up a ton of points and a ton of yards as well. And Cincinnati obviously did that to a lot of teams this year. But be that as it may, there was a clear divide in terms of what was going on offensively between Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith. And my question now becomes, well, Russell Wilson has said, at least on 2 occasions, that he would like to come back to Pittsburgh. The other issue is the article that Gerry wrote. It was the type of article you typically don't see unless it's right before or right after a coordinator gets fired. And I have a hard time believing they're going to fire Arthur Smith. He's still under contract. They apparently liked what he did most of the time. But this just really creates, obviously, if I'm sitting here rambling for the last 5 minutes, it's creating a lot of talking points about just the direction of where this offense is headed. I often wonder, does it also signify that maybe Smith was pissed because he wanted to stay with Justin Fields? I don't know. We've heard that rumor as well. But the bottom line for me in all of this is that as an offense, this team doesn't seem to be headed in any sort of positive direction right now. The offensive line, we know needs work. The skill positions need work. We got to find a quarterback. So I'm really curious as to exactly what the point of Gerry's article was, not necessarily in its content, but in its timing and its delivery. So stay tuned on that. We'll talk much more about this coming up on the podcast on Thursday night. The other thing to talk about real quick is Cooper Kupp. And I am typically one of those that I get so irritated anytime that a guy that's like 31, 32 years old comes on the market. Every Steelers fan immediately has name recognition and goes, oh, we got to get that guy. And it frustrates me to no end because oftentimes that player is at the downside of his career. It doesn't mean the player can't contribute, doesn't mean the player can't be an important part of a successful team, but all too often it doesn't lead to that. I'm a little different with Cooper Kupp. First of all, the Steelers do have a bit of a relationship with the Rams. You'll recall that we made a trade with them for guard Kevin Dotson, and Dotson's actually had a very nice career in LA the last couple of seasons. So there is familiarity with Omar Khan and their GM out in LA, Les Snead, I believe it is. And so therefore, my thinking is that maybe Cooper Kupp can be had. Now, he's only played in about 33 of a possible, 54 games, 51 games over the last 3 seasons. And that's not great. I mean, you need availability, okay? But I would take him in a situation where maybe you don't have to give up much. You get him to maybe $12 million a year. And if you can get 12 to 14 games out of him, but also his presence as a competitor, as a leader, as a guy that has won the Super Bowl, a guy that has a Super Bowl MVP to his name. We got to rebuild that wide receiver room. And, there are rumors that George Pickens is already George Pickens. I think George Perkins played for the North Carolina Tar Heels a long time ago. Yeah, George Pickens allegedly telling people that this is going to be his last year in Pittsburgh. And, well, okay, if it is, then get something for him now. But that's a whole other discussion point. I'm just simply saying I would definitely kick the tires on Cooper Kupp. I've always liked him. I think he's got skills. I think he's got ability. I think he's a perfect complement to a guy like Pickens if they're going to hang on to him. He's a good route runner and picks up things very, very quickly. So, it's just a thought. I'm not going to be heartbroken if they don't go that route. I mean, we all know they're going to add in the draft. They're definitely going to add in free agency. But so those are my 2 thoughts for tonight. And again, I invite all of you, make sure you check out the podcast, the SCB Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated, coming up on Thursday night, live 10 o'clock on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can check it out on any number of platforms if you just want to listen. But I definitely encourage you to check out the live show. We have a wonderful cast of folks that join us in the chat every single week. They are good football people, the good people in general. We have a blast. And I'm sure you probably would too. So anyway, I'm getting out of here, and hopefully we'll see you on Thursday night. This is SteelDad signing off on the SCB Steelers Inside Blitz.